Oh my goodness, we have another episode for you today. We are going to talk about our top 5 audiophile recordings, and we're going to categorize them by recording venue, meaning is it a recording in a studio? We have a couple different categories for that, or a live recording in a small venue, or a live recording in a large venue like a concert hall or a stadium, that sort of thing. Now, we are talking here about sonic quality. We're going to rate these not by what is my favorite or what we think is the most influential or even the best from a musical perspective, although these are really good from a musical perspective. But no, we're talking about sonic purity, the kind of records that can transport you to the venue in which the music was recorded or bring those musicians right into your listening space. That's stuff that we audiophiles love. So let's get to it. Our first category is studio recordings with a small ensemble. Typically that's 3, 4, maybe 5 musicians, generally in a studio playing together at the same time. There might be some isolation, a singer, things of that nature, but generally speaking, this is straightforward kind of music recorded in a small studio space. Some of the records that came to mind for this category, got to think of Joni Mitchell's Blue. Oh, what a beautiful sounding record that is. In the folk/blues category, Muddy Waters, folk singer. What a scary good record that one is. And if you're into rock music, or call it classic rock or folk rock, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Deja Vu. Great record, of course, and a beautiful sounding recording, especially if you can get the original pressing. Great stuff. But the number one choice for this category, Julie London. Julie is her name. This is such a good recording. This is not the original. If you can find the original, good on you. It has been re-released too in an audiophile pressing, and you must get it in the mono pressing. That's crucial. But I tell you, this just brings her alive. She appears right there before your speakers. Very good quality recording. Our second category are studio recordings, but with a larger ensemble. So you might think of a horn section or string section or maybe a chorus. When you have a lot of instrumentation, a lot of voices, it's a bigger challenge for a stereo system to reproduce that. So we created its own category. Some of the records, well, the first record that came to mind was Duke Ellington, Masterpieces by Ellington. This is an iconic recording and done so well. A soundtrack came to mind, When Harry Met Sally, Harry Connick Jr. That is an underrated recording in my mind. You get that on the right stereo system, it's going to blow your mind. And then, of course, there's the great Charles Mingus, one of the best big bands of all time in all its incarnations, and probably my favorite record of all time, Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. But for the number one spot, we went to a different Charles Mingus album, Ahum. This, sonically speaking, is about as good as it gets. This may be the best sounding record ever produced. So get it. Our third category, also studio albums, but modern studio albums. I think of them as assembled, meaning it certainly uses a multi-track recording, anywhere from 8 tracks to 128. And most importantly, each instrument is recorded individually and typically isolated from one another. So in our first category, you'd have the musicians in the studio. If it's a stereo recording, 2 microphones, that's your soundstage. With this category, this more modern approach to recording music, it's the engineer who really artificially creates the soundstage by panning the various recorded mic'd instruments to the left, to the right, to the center. He uses compression to bring some forward in the mix, and you typically get special effects in these kind of recordings. So it might be sounds that you wouldn't hear from a normal instrument. I don't know, thunder, the sound of a car crash, whatever it might be. So for these sort of modern assembled studio recordings, the first one that came to my mind is the Beatles' Abbey Road, perhaps one of the first recordings to fully utilize the capabilities of a modern recording studio, and it did so spectacularly. It is a great sounding record. Another one, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? I'm telling you, think of those iconic recordings where there's a lot of chatter going on in the background, like there's a party happening, that sort of thing. That is a fantastic sounding recording. And then, of course, we thought of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, one of the most iconic records ever. That is clearly a very high quality recording and a modern masterpiece. But for number one, we went with Steely Dan Gaucho. Now, yes, you could have picked Asia, I think, would have been a very good choice as well, but we think Gaucho tops Asia from a sonic perspective just a wee bit. If you ever want to show off your system to someone who likes pop rock music, this is the record to do it with. So go get this record if you don't have it already. Our fourth category is small venues, typically live music in a small club, be it a rock and roll club or a jazz club, that sort of thing. Some of the records that came to mind: West Montgomery, Full House, great sounding record. There are probably several Miles Davis recordings that would fit that bill, but I think the one that might sound best is At the Plugged Nickel from 1965. I also thought of one that you may not be aware of, and frankly it's not available on vinyl, but you can get it on CD, the Joe Morris Quartet, At the Old Office. Gets a little out there. If you're into spicy chords and that sort of thing, do check out Joe Morris, a wonderful guitar player, and that particular recording from a sonic perspective is absolutely first class. But the one that we picked, the iconic, one of the best records ever recorded, Bill Evans Trio, Waltz for Debbie. This is just about as good as it gets. It's a quintessential small venue recording. The fellow who recorded it was sitting at one of those little round tables in the club, and he did an excellent job. Really takes you to that venue. You're transported. Good stuff. Our last category is large venues. So think classical concert halls where you could have a giant orchestra, maybe 100 pieces or more, or even stadiums. Some of the records that came to mind, the first one that came to mind is Berlioz, Symphonie Fantastique, particularly the Charles Munch Boston Symphony, I think it's 1958 on RCA. That is a phenomenal sounding record. One that I can never pronounce properly, La Filmagardie, I think it is. We'll put La Filmagardie. That is an iconic record in the audiophile community. Everybody knows it as a really great sounding sonic record, and it's just beautiful music as well. But it's not all classical music in this regard. I think the Grateful Dead, Live Dead, 1969, recorded in a big stadium setting, is underrated both musically and sonically. Great sounding record. But our choice for this category, it's an oldie but a goodie, Holst the Planets, 1958. This one conducted by Sir Malcolm Sargent with the BBC Symphony. This sounds so good, and it is so powerful. Be careful, this one will blow you away. And if you are into rock and roll music and want to sort of dip your toe into the classical world, this is a good one to start with. Really, really great stuff. And this particular recording is just off the charts good. It really is fantastic. So there you have it. That is our list of the top 5 audiophile records categorized by recording venue. We'll see you at the next record.